well, where would you say the Black voice can be enhanced with more attention to creating like spiritual texts?
Mm.
And I ask that just in the context of a lot of folks, myself included, really identifying at present that the real path forward in Black unity is that, right? Is unity, community, and education. And like, what are the pathways that people take to that? And spirituality has been one of them. But I'm just curious, in your opinion, like, where do you feel like a spiritual text fits in the context of the Black community at present in terms of its necessity or lack thereof?
I mean, when I think about spirituality, I'm thinking about the interior life, that so many people before me have spoke to. And when I say I wrote this out of the Black interior life, I mean not just out of my own inner world, but I tried my best to do what Toni Morrison calls, this practice of imagination for her ancestors, the people that came before her. And I think um I spent a lot of years talking and thinking about Black liberation without meaningfully contending with what was happening in me, and how systems of oppression and anti-Blackness and indignity were living and surviving in me. And I think when we confront our interior lives, and when we protect, confront, preserve the Black interior life, we're able to kind of withstand the violence of the world around us better. I think we're clear about who we are. We're clear about what we want. We're clear about our memory.
Yeah.
And that can only do good for me. I mean, and people, I think, can make the assumption that I'm a very religious person, or a person of a lot of faith. I personally don't have a great amount of faith. I wake up most days not believing that God exists at all. At the end of the day, I have to figure out why I wrote a book to a God I'm not convinced exists. But I think there's meaning in the attempt. I think there's meaning in the journey of trying to connect your interior life with something beyond, something sacred, or some mystery.
Was there any like catalyst or like moment that you can look to that you feel like started to shift your ability to look at your interior life?
Reading. This is maybe it's too obvious of an answer, but I do feel like reading did it for me. So you said Blue Sky is a sacred text for you. Beloved is my sacred text. The books I kind of sleep next to that are on my nightstand, Morrison, June Jordan, Audre Lorde. I encountered all of them and felt like I'll just say this about the Black novel in general. It's very difficult to find a kind of a Black novel that's not speaking to the Black interior life.
Facts.
Toni Morrison, what I quoted earlier about that practice of imagination, she has this essay in The Site of Memory, and she's talking about a very specific time where Black people were beginning to show up in books for the first time, Black enslaved people. And she's criticizing the moment and saying, okay, well, you're finally putting us in books, but it's completely absent of the Black interior life. You're putting, our physicality in books, but you're not putting complicated interior lives into your writing. And so when she talks about that practice of imagination, it's in part in resistance to all kinds of writing that had begun that was emptying us and reducing us to one-dimensional caricatures. And so when I encounter, Beloved, when I encounter Octavia Butler and kind of Lauren and Parable of the Sower, my God is a different name. And she has this rich interior life that is very complicated. I feel
Can I just say real quick that y'all
journey.
be acting like Parable of the Sower is an easy read, and it is not. So I just want to point it out for everybody out there that Parable of the Sower and Song of Solomon are, and let me also add, W.E.B. Du Bois' Souls of Black Folks are three of the hardest reads out here, okay? And y'all be really just throwing these names out here like, yeah, y'all didn't read that? And I am a smart person called Arthur Riley. And each of those books has made me have to put it down and say, are you a smart person?
That's how
Why
I
is
felt
this
the
so
first page of
difficult?
Beloved. That's how I felt. I was like, I don't know if I can make this journey. I don't know if this is meant for me. I might need a
I don't
sport
know if I can make this
gnosis.
journey. Like, I have tried 4 times to read Song of Solomon.
Song of Solomon, Beloved, Parable of the Sower. I feel like it's almost intentional in a subversive way of trying to make it disorienting to kind of enter that world so that other people can experience the disorientation of kind of the worlds that we're forced to occupy. But it is hard. I'm like, I don't know who's speaking. I don't know what's happening. But you will. I believe you will meet that goal because
People say, I believe in you.
And there's plenty I haven't read, but I think even just reading fiction in general does something to how you think about your own interior life and how seriously you take it. Because all of us, we have worlds inside of us. It's just a matter of who's paying attention and who's not. And I think what fiction does is when it forces you into someone else's interior life, you can't help but to confront yours.
I think there's something like consistent with literature doing that, right? No matter where you're from, or, like we always talk about, like, butterfly in the sky, I could go twice as high because I took a look in a book, right?
Mm-hmm.
But how would you say, because I'm always fascinated by the uniqueness of pop culture and art for Black people in America, in how it has had to speak for us. Can you just expound upon like the uniqueness of what you're talking about as it relates to Black folks? Because what you're basically saying is that it's almost as if like the fiction gives us entry into our own nonfiction.
I think it's a journey everyone has to make. I think, what white people, for example, have the same call to examine their interior lives, but for a different reason, because they can't stop launching bombs and lynching people. And they need to figure out what's going on in their inner lives that
Richard
is
Wright
perpetuating that.
Richard Wright has a quote that I just learned. I'm paraphrasing, but essentially the quote is, wherever white people go, they create it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And they have to figure out why that is. Why is that necessary
why do y'all
for
need
you?
it? Right.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But Black people specifically, I would say the reason is a little bit more distinct. I think that I'll just say what the first thing that comes to my mind is, if you descend from people who were enslaved, you descend from people who, at some point in history, their liberation, their freedom was relegated to their interior life. They didn't have agency in their bodies. My great-great-great-grandmother didn't have agency of over what she ate, what she did. She didn't always have full agency over what she said, but what she did have agency over are those secret places, I believe, in her inner world that no master can touch, that no one could. I like to think they were cussing out people in their minds. Also, preserving stories, preserving memory in their interior lives that they weren't always able to articulate in the world around them. And so the journey for us to stay close to, the Black interior is really it's a intergenerational calling. It's an intergenerational way of being in the world that that there are parts of us that we're not liberated always. We're not liberated to always bring into the external world. And so I feel like in cultivating and paying attention to what's happening in me, it's one way to honor, it's one way to bear witness to, what I can't say when a cop pulls me over, what I can't do when someone does so and so to me, but also what was in my grandma, what was in her grandmother.
People, we are having real discussions in a real time. And it'll be real whack for you to only get this little snippet. So you can get the whole combo over there at my Patreon.
In some ways, my body is kind of steadying me and kind of getting me close to myself before I have the energy to pick up the pen. I have to really figure out what's happening in me. I have to really figure out what I want to say and how I'm going to make it honest.
Intentional, deliberate.
Mm-hmm.